Hello everyone, welcome to the October special Joyful Death podcast. I'm Joyful Death! Okay, that was really weird, sorry. And this month, Dammit Jim and I will be taking you on a frightfully wonderful adventure through the spooky, the horrifying, and curious as we explore and discuss different topics related to the season. This week, we're talking about Cryptids and Monsters. This podcast will be split into two parts due to the massiveness of Jim's knowledge. His knowledge on the subject. We started the podcast last week by telling you a little bit about ourselves. If you caught last week's episode, then you may already know that, like I said before, I'm Joyful Death, but I go by the name Joy. I'm a YouTube's Twitch streamer, but previously to that, I was an OR nurse. I still have my RN license, and I firmly believe in science and facts. However, Halloween is my favorite holiday, and I firmly believe it should be celebrated all year round. I love to discuss and hear about the possibility of what might be out there, and I believe that just because we haven't documented it in science doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, and I'm willing to explore the possibilities. Now, for the dude that we all know and love, my good friend Dammit Jim, we've been friends for something like 8 years, and since before I started streaming. Jim, why are you qualified to talk about this week's subject, and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, hello, I'm Jim Bostic. You guys probably know me better as Dammit Jim. In 2006, I founded a group called Paradise Lost Investigations. It's a paranormal investigation group. But before 2006, going way back into the 90s, I've been interested in the paranormal, actively investigating it since I was about 18. But I've been a paranormal enthusiast my whole life. So I've been looking into ghosts, cryptids, UFOs, demon possession, you name it, I've probably looked into it.
Nice. All right.
And this week, we're talking about something I have loved my entire life. In fact, one of my favorite childhood memories has to do with the subject of cryptozoology.
That's a little frightening.
Well, because in 1972, in the St. Louis area, there were sightings all over the news of a Bigfoot. Well, when I was probably 7 or 8, my parents it would happen to pop up in the news again, and my mom and dad took 7 or 8-year-old me riding around the back roads one night, quote unquote, looking for Bigfoot.
That's so cute.
So yep. But as you said, you enjoy science. Well, this week I think you're going to enjoy it.
Oh, good.
Because cryptozoology is an actual science.
But is it actual science of things that may or may not?
It's an actual science because it is just the study of unknown animals. Now,
how can you study animals if they're unknown?
Well, they are unknown in the fossil record, but people say they have seen them. Now, I understand that sounds like something about Bigfoot and monsters and things like that, but you have to understand that we are constantly finding new species of life on this planet every day.
Absolutely.
So, hitherto unknown animals, like at one point the silverback gorilla, or even as recently as a few weeks ago, scientists found a amorphous blob-like life form in Antarctica.
Well, and then there was that fish too that they thought it was extinct.
The colosynth.
Yes, that one. Yep, and they thought it was extinct.
Yeah.
You made the point that I like that you made was that you said that it doesn't exist in the fossil record, which I think is a really good point, is that we haven't found like evidence, physical evidence, like, bones or fossils that we can actually be like, look, here it is, and have definitive evidence. We just have basically like, oh, I saw it type of evidence, like witness accounts, right?
Right. Now, but again, I said I told you this story like anecdotally, but in the 1930s, a very popular movie that has been remade more times than sense should say a movie should be remade. But King Kong was released in the 1930s, 40s.
Right.
King Kong, the idea of this huge monkey came from reports of the silverback mountain gorilla.
Oh, okay.
People saw this like 6 to 7 foot tall, 400 odd pound gorilla, and it didn't sound anything like the lowland gorillas that people were used to.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the 1950s, they discovered the silverback gorilla.
Okay.
So, like, these myths and these legends, these monsters, might actually be real known creatures that we just haven't identified yet.
Or just haven't been able to find hard evidence of. Do you think, like, maybe there's just, like, a Bigfoot graveyard somewhere and we just haven't found it yet?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because we'll get to the what I like to call off the goofy crap-o-meter a little bit later.
Oh, okay, cool.
Because some of those things do happen. But like I said, monsters. I want to clarify the difference between monsters and cryptids.
Okay.
Every culture throughout humanity has had mythology about monsters.
Mm-hmm.
Cryptids, by definition, are like tangible, like a Bigfoot might possibly just be a big monkey. A monster is something that is, by implication, has a supernatural. These are some things that, like your hydras and your cyclops and your sirens, those are monsters. But a Bigfoot or a dogman or a large serpent of some sort, those might exist because we have similar creatures now.
Okay.
So, but because of these cultures, they've had myths about dragons and leviathans and giant birds and wolves and bears, and then there's like shapeshifters, which are all part of folklores and legends.
Okay. But
sadly, or awesomely, however you want to talk about it, a lot of these folklore things get seen by people.
Okay. The folklore stuff, and we're not talking cryptids now, we're talking folklore stuff.
We're talking these monsters of folklore, because even them are being seen by people. But were they, let's use the example of dragons.
Okay.
I sent you recently a clip of a video taken in Laos in 2016. Somebody recorded on their phone what looks very much like a Game of Thrones style dragon flying across a mountain range.
Weird. I didn't see that one in all of the stuff you sent me. I saw a bunch of stuff, but I missed that one. I'm sorry. Joy doesn't watch things.
Yeah, Joy doesn't joy. So even folklore gets seen, but do we know what it is? We don't know yet.
Was it a UFO, maybe?
Well, could be a weird shaped bird, because we'll get to that in a bit. But cryptozoology covers all of that. It does cover folklore creatures too, because people said they saw it, so we don't know if they're there or what they are yet. Now, the term cryptozoology was coined in 1959 by a zoologist named Bernard Hovelmans, and if I said that wrong, I apologize.
It was like Hovelmans.
Yeah, exactly. So
sorry.
In 1955, he wrote a book called On the Track of Unknown Animals, and it's basically the cryptozoology Bible. Oh. It's basically how to scientifically look into things that other science will say can't be real.
Okay.
So, but these hidden and unknown animals, they say it's like regular scientists will say it's a pseudoscience. But really, this is just an extension of biology and zoology.
Okay.
Because, like I said, your silverback gorilla was just as strange and excitable as a Bigfoot. But it's real.
And the argument can be made that there is despite the fact that humans have proliferated and spread across the globe, there still remains a significant portion of the earth that we haven't fully explored, like the depths of the ocean and deep forests that really haven't been fully explored, and I, who's to say that there isn't something we just haven't seen yet? And maybe it's close to becoming extinct because of, human progression or something. I don't know.
Well, it's true, and there's a regular. It's kind of getting better well known now. People call it the missing 411. There's a author and researcher named David Paulides who keeps writing reports of people who have gone missing in national parks and forests.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these people, there is subjective evidence that says could have been taken by possible cryptids or other things, but really Paulides keeps saying that people keep going missing in these forests, and it's no big surprise because these forests are massive.
Right.
Some of the U.S. national forests are so massive that yes, we can have all the drones and airplanes and aerial footage of these things we want, but walking through 1,000 acres of forest, it's almost impossible to do to find these missing people.
Yeah, and you can't see from above, you can't see down into the tree cover.
Right, so if it's impossible to find missing, especially in 2019 when everyone's got a cell phone they could track, well, it's going to be almost next to impossible to find, a big hairy hominid walking through the woods.
And who doesn't want to be found?
Right. The term hominid I just used was created by a doctor named Loren Coleman. Mm-hmm. He is basically the granddaddy of modern cryptozoology. Mm-hmm. So if anyone is interested in cryptozoology, I strongly suggest looking into some of the books that Loren Coleman has written.
Okay.
And so hominid is a word that I'm going to use quite frequently talking about Bigfoot. And it's should be a canid when I'm talking about Dogman.
Okay.
In a bit.
I mean, we've used hominid. Hominid isn't just for describing these type of things. It's anything that is human-like.
Yeah,
right?
But this has basically become more accepted because Coleman used it describing Bigfoot and Bigfoot-like creatures.
Okay.
So, but the interesting thing about these things is they're everywhere.
Okay.
All over the world. All over the world. America doesn't just have we got all the monsters. Everybody has been seeing these things since beginning of time to now.
Okay.
Every habitable continent on Earth has some sort of creature, be it something that is either completely supernatural, or be it something that is more tangible. They're seen in towns and forests, mountains and caves. Some that everybody kind of agrees are a natural animal, and some that are more than that. They're supernatural or preternatural, like things like skinwalkers and Wendigo and some other things.
And so people are coming mostly into contact with these when they are
alone in the woods and
usually alone, almost always alone.
No, but they're separated from society. They're people. They're a handful of kids out camping one night and they saw something.
Right, away out in the woods, away from people, a number of people,
Well, and much like your foxes and coyotes and things that are moving into cities now, there are some small towns that are forested areas that are seeing these things coming into town. Okay. Things have been caught on CCTV. Things have been caught by cell phone camera, like people walking down the road or driving down the road, seeing things they can't explain in their towns.
And that would make sense if you compare them to, like you said, foxes, wolves, coyotes, and stuff. I mean, when I was living before we moved, it was a pretty populous area. It's a suburb of the cities. I mean, it's a far out suburb. We still lived a decent ways away, but I saw a coyote just walking in the middle of the industrial park. I'm like, dude, what? Hello?
Right.
What are you doing here? And that was a pretty big town,
A few years ago, I live in a very small, but we were 5-minute drive from a decent sized town.
Right.
And a few years ago, a deer ran into the county courthouse.
What? Just like
Yeah.
was like, hey, what's up?
Well, right, because a large creek runs through the center of this neighboring town,
Mm-hmm.
and it just kind of wandered in because there's a little like grassy area in front of it, and it bolted through the doors. And,
Oh, it like went into the like just
yeah, it
walked
was
through the
in
front
the
door.
yeah, it was in the
Oh,
courthouse.
God.
I had to have animal control come get the deer out.
So funny. I mean, I've seen that on people's videos on YouTube and stuff too, where the deer is like in their house freaking out and breaking crap because it's like, oh God, I don't know how to get out.
I just saw one on Facebook yesterday where a deer like was running away from something and jumped into a storefront window and shattered a window
Jeez.
and like nearly hit somebody sitting on a chair.
Christ.
So
It's crazy.
animals are encroaching into our territory because we have encroached into theirs.
Right. Right.
And so what's to say these other creatures that we just don't necessarily know yet
Mm-hmm.
aren't coming into our towns
Right.
and coming into our backyards.
Mm-hmm.
So there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of known cryptids out there. Where I say known by they're not fossil record known, but people have discussed these things.
Okay.
And a really good book to look into these things, and you'll have this in your links to the video,
Okay.
is Cryptozoology A to Z by our friend Lauren Cole. Just talked.
It's who
And
again? Oh, Lauren. Coleman.
Yeah, and Jerome Clark.
Mm-hmm.
This basically will cover some of the big names in cryptozoology, as well as some of the better known cryptids.
Okay.
So, because we could talk about different cryptids for months, this could be a very long. This could be a series in and of itself.
Okay. You could go into
But-
each one in detail. Like each one
Right.
could have their own. Yeah.
But some of the best known ones, the ones that people have heard about their whole lives through the cultural zeitgeist, and they have become pop culture icons,
Mm-hmm.
are things like Bigfoot here in the United States and Canada,
Right.
the Loch Ness Monster in Scotland,
Yay. Nessie.
the Abominable Snowman or the Yeti in Tibet,
Right.
the Chupacabra in Mexico.
Isn't that a goat sucker? That's the other
Yep.
name, right? Perfect.
Yep. And then there's the large black panthers people see all over the place. Most infamously, in the UK, the Beast of Bodmin Moor.
Oh, okay.
These large black cats been seen. Heck, we have a local legend here of one.
Oh.
So some of these creatures that sound legit have been all over the world, and we'll talk about a little bit of that shortly.
Mhm.
Because Bigfoot, when I say Bigfoot, where do you think when I say Bigfoot?
Oh, I think like North American woods, like, Montana, like maybe over in Yellowstone, or just,
Mhm.
or maybe Canada, like they've got a ton of woods up there and stuff.
That's exactly what most people think. The
Yeah.
North American West.
Yeah.
Well, Bigfoot has been sighted all across the country, from the Everglades to Maine to the deserts of the Southwest.
Deserts even, huh? You would
Yep.
think they're too hairy and it would be too hot for them.
But Bigfoot's not just an American creature. Almost every habitable continent has seen something similar to a Bigfoot.
Like a tall, standing,
A large, hair-covered.
bipedal,
Yeah, so I have
man-looking thing.
right. I've got a list of a few names, just a few.
Hmm.
Throughout most of Europe, they refer to these things as wild men.
Okay.
In Canada, obviously, we basically know it as the Sasquatch.
Oh, yeah. Hmm.
In Tibet, much like your microphone for your computer, it's called the Yeti. In Siberia, they're called Almas.
Almas. Oh,
And
Alma from Fear. Wait, sorry, totally different.
right,
Never
no,
mind.
absolutely. In Pakistan and Afghanistan, they're the Barmano.
Okay.
In Australia, they're the Yowie.
Okay.
And in Japan, they're Hibagon.
Interesting.
So people have been seeing humanoids that are covered in fur that seem gorilla-like all over the world.
So, would it be safe to say that maybe these are different offshoots of the same kind of species? Like maybe...
Exactly. Where we have the silverbacks, we have the lowland, we have
Right.
all these different kinds of apes. Well,
it makes like I wish you could see them so that like you could see like their differences because there's so little evidence of them, you can't be like, oh well, this one has more of like a tan coloring in its fur, and this one's maybe more golden brown, or you know what I mean? Like
right.
we don't get to know that.
Some of your more active Bigfoot hunters have given them subspecies because these sightings do have things like that. They make certain noises. They have certain colors. They have certain things like that. There's 2 television shows that are on currently that kind of cover Bigfoot in great detail. One is Finding Bigfoot on, I think it's Nat Geo. Mm-hmm. That's the one starring Matt Moneymaker and his team.
Matt Moneymaker?
Mm-hmm.
Did he name himself that?
I really hope so. But their team goes basically the most traditional route of going out to places where they've had reported sightings of Bigfoot. Mm-hmm. They do a thing called sound blasting, where they take a supposed Bigfoot call and they make a big roar out in the woods to see if anything will answer. Another common sign of Bigfoot is tree knocks.
Have you watched that? Does that work?
Oh yeah. Sometimes they do get response. Most of the time it's just coyotes. Okay. But sometimes, because they use a forward-looking infrared camera, so sometimes they will pick up weird anomalies of something walking around. Okay. But then there's my other favorite show. Now, I love the show because it is so cheesy and fake.
Okay, so you're saying it's cheesy and fake.
Yes, this one is absolutely cheesy and totally fake, but I love it because, unlike Matt Moneymaker, the show called Finding Bigfoot, they've never found shit. But this show finds something every week, and it's called Mountain Monsters.
Okay.
I love Mountain Monsters because of how cheesy it is, but at the same time, they're the ones that have acknowledged that there are local names for these Bigfoot. Okay. Like there's a group in Tennessee called the Midnight Whistler. Okay. Basically because people have seen a large black Bigfoot that's call sounds a lot like a high-pitched whistle.
Okay.
And throughout most of Appalachia, there are more sightings in the Appalachian Mountains than anywhere else in the United States.
Oh.
Of not only just Bigfoot, but all sorts of different creatures. Okay. But like you have some of the Appalachian hillbillies call them boogers. Some of them call them yahoos.
Yeah.
There's tons of different names.
A bunch of different names, yeah.
But like the Yahoo makes a Yahoo noise. The Midnight Whistler whistles. Mm-hmm. Some of these different creatures have been identified for having color markings or sounds that they make. But again, this is all anecdotal evidence. There's no body we can look at and go, hey, this one has a than that one.
So in relation to that show that you were talking about, you're saying it's goofy and...
It's goofy, but it does give you real facts. It's just obviously facts geared to make a show silly.
Okay. So when they do the show, because you say they find something every week.
Oh yeah, they have some sort of evidence every week where, Bigfoot got near their trap, or they got video evidence of Bigfoot looking in a window, or they've got thermal imaging of the Bigfoot walking away.
Do you feel like that's rigged? Like it's fake?
It's absolutely fake.
Okay, so they're like hoaxing it, kind of being like, maybe they're making the tracks and they're doing all this stuff just to make the ratings or whatever.
Yeah, but the show is very tongue-in-cheek. The whole idea behind the show is this is a group of hillbilly hunters out looking for the Bigfoot.
Oh, okay.
And so, unlike Finding Bigfoot, which is real scientists, they have a primatologist, they have, cryptozoologists, they have, specialist scientists there looking for Bigfoot. Mm-hmm. This one is a bunch of hillbillies who make silly jokes and always find a Bigfoot.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. All right, I see.
But there's another show that covers a lot of cryptids called Monster Quest.
Okay.
Monster Quest covers all of the ones that you can think of, and that one does it factually, and they send real scientists out to interview people and to look for evidence, and that one is the most precise.
Okay.
So Monster Quest is really good.
Have they found things?
They've found some evidence that they can't explain. They found hairs that didn't quite match up to anything that was known. They found some weird DNA once in a while.
Okay.
but there's no definitive Bigfoot corpse, which we will talk about in a minute.
Okay. I'm looking forward to talking about
a Bigfoot corpse.
Bigfoot corpse.
But the word Bigfoot came to popular consciousness in 1958.
Okay.
There was a journalist named Andrew Gonzoli for the Humboldt Times. He highlighted a fun, if dubious, letter from a reader about loggers in Northern California who discovered mysteriously large footprints.
Mm-hmm.
A quote from it says, "Maybe we have a relative abominable snowman in the Himalayas." He wrote that in September 21st in the Herald. But because of his article, there was a huge reader response. People started saying, "Oh my God, I saw that thing too," or "I saw tracks."
Interesting.
So it became there was follow-up articles, and it started getting out into because somebody said, "I saw it." That kind of a Me Too happened,
right?
Because somebody was open enough to say it.
Right, and there's probably like the fear of the stigma of like, oh, you're just seeing things, blah blah blah. But to have that confirmed and be like, oh, well, somebody else saw it. Well,
right.
Maybe I wasn't crazy,
Right.
You kind of tell yourself like, oh, I'm just seeing things because you don't want to be scared, So you just foof it off.
Well, it was a lot like we said when we were talking about aliens last week too.
Mm-hmm.
This was 1958.
This about the same time.
Right, so people were seeing things that you got to remember the quote-unquote greatest generation. Their whole mantra was, we don't talk about those things.
Right.
Things that make us uncomfortable, things that make us scared, things that we can't explain, we just don't talk about those things.
Right.
So when somebody finally openly said, hey, some stuff happened, people were like, oh, holy crap, this happened to me too.
Mm-hmm.
So when somebody was able to talk about it, it came out. But they're called Bigfoot because of the tracks that get left behind.
Okay. I guess that makes sense, yeah.
Bigfoot tracks are probably the most common quote-unquote evidence we have of Bigfoot.
The most common evidence, you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Tracks have been found all across the world of large, what look like human feet, in most cases.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them have five toes. In fact, the first group of them only had 4. And then the one I told you about when I was a kid in Missouri was called Momo the Monster. It only had 3.
Oh.
So this big, right? The name given to it because Missouri, M-O, and by the Missouri River, M-O.
Okay.
So Momo the Monster.
I like it.
But these big footprints have been seen constantly, and like people will get plaster casts of them to have proof that they saw this.
Right.
And they're probably the most common evidence. Occasionally you'll find hair, occasionally you'll find saliva or mucus, or maybe even possible urine or fecal matter. But the problem,
I can't imagine going through the woods and being like, I'm gonna pick up this poop and bring it with me.
Well, the worst part of it is, though, is the average, people who see these things are people like you and me. We don't have access to labs to test the DNA of this.
Right.
So, you and I are walking through the woods and we see, something that we can't explain. We can't ship it off to, the nearest biology lab.
Right. And they'd probably just be like, yeah, no.
Right. So it takes somebody who, like a biologist or a primatologist,
who has those resources.
Right.
Yeah. That makes sense.
So, but the primatologists and the biologists tend to think that Bigfoot might be a relic from Gigantopithecus. One of the stages. Gigantopithecus is one of the stages in what we believe is human evolution.
Okay.
It was unlike Homo sapiens, it was covered in more fur. It's one of our nearest ancestors other than the Neanderthal.
Okay. So like maybe there was a branch that branched off, and there was, what was it again? Gigantopithecus?
Yep.
So that went off one side and we went off the Neanderthal side?
Right.
Okay.
But the thing is,
I could go for that.
I could too. All the Gigantopithecus fossils that have been found, though, were found in Asia. So, but it wouldn't be even that much of a stretch to think that they crossed the Bering Land Bridge before the Bering Sea became a thing.
Yep.
And crossed over into the U.S. and so forth.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's possible. Do we know? We don't know.
Right.
Because there have been no fossils found in America of the Gigantopithecus.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you know, to be fair, fossilization is a pretty lucky, miraculous thing that happens. You know, it has to have the right conditions. It has to be preserved, or you don't. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Think of all the dinosaur bones that we're still finding, but like you only have the head of a lot of dinosaurs, and they're still guessing, like,
right.
You know, well, this dinosaur we think is this because of what, but we don't have the rest of the body. You know, so...
Right. Well, I mean, like the T-Rex during our lifetime, the T-Rex, they thought the T-Rex stood upright. Kind of like they see, like you in the Jurassic Park, you see the Velociraptor standing kind of upright.
Right.
Like a dog.
Well, that's not even. Yeah, the Velociraptor's not even the right one they have in Jurassic Park. Yeah.
But like the Tyrannosaurus Rex, we've realized is a lot more like the one in Jurassic Park. It was kind of more like a chicken, where its upper body is above its feet. So, like, we're still kind of just now beginning to understand possibly what these things looked like. Until we start cloning them and have a Jurassic Park, we really don't know.
Let's not do that. We've seen the movie. We know how that happens.
We've got 5 movies saying that's a bad idea.
Well, and you know, I mean, and because we can use dinosaurs as a really good example, because we have a really strong fossil record and we're learning more all the time, like, we've learned that a lot more dinosaurs than we thought had feathers.
Right.
You know, we didn't know that because it doesn't fossilize well. So, I mean, that really goes to tell you that, like, fossilization is a very precise. It's specific, and it has to be done right. You just have to be lucky, kind of, in a way, for things to line up correctly. So maybe the hominid type Giganticus whatever weren't in the right conditions when they died, and their fossils weren't preserved. Like, that bone has to be mineralized, and instead of being mineralized, maybe it got disintegrated somehow. Or
maybe much like, again, appealing to the scientific thought, we have animals in the woods living today, hundreds of thousands of animals, correct?
Yep.
These animals, because by their very nature of being alive, they will eventually
what?
They will eventually die.
Right.
And when they die, eventually their corpses rot away.
Yeah.
There are bones left.
Right.
Now, the thing is, let's imagine a deer dies in the woods.
Yep.
Squirrels and mice will eat the bones that are left laying there. Sometimes you'll find a skull, sometimes you'll find a set of antlers or something, but most times you'll find nothing. And if you imagine that all of these animals that by their very nature will eventually die in the woods, we should be walking around on piles and piles and piles of corpses and bones.
Right.
If everything, pardon the loud noise, if everything did fossilize, then the world would be built on bones.
Right. But
so not everything does.
Right. Nature has a really great way of reclaiming its resources.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. I mean, you would think that we would find something at some point, somewhere, someday. We just maybe haven't found it yet. Or another thing too is maybe those bodies, because the dinosaurs were so long ago, it had more ideal conditions to fossilize things than it did at the time when the hominids were, you know, they just weren't in the ideal conditions, and they didn't die in the ideal conditions.
Right. And again, too, is if you find, let's say we find a Bigfoot bone.
Yep.
Supposition says Bigfoot are very similar in makeup to humans.
Right.
Well, like a femur laying out in the woods, you're not going to touch it because it looks like a human femur. Right. And 2, if you do touch it, you're going to wind up calling the cops because you found what's part of a human body out in the woods.
Right.
So it could be misidentification.
Right.
Another thing that scientists, a guy, primatologist named John Napier, thought that these things could be a branch of what's called a paranthropus.
Okay, what's that?
It's another type of large, hairy, gorilla-like animal.
Okay.
The Paranthropus robustus, it had a gorilla-like crested skull, and it walked bipedally. But again, like the Gigantopithecus, all Paranthropus were found in Africa.
The fossils, okay. So he's saying that maybe they came from those gorillas, like as a evolutionary thing.
Or they are a type of that kind of, that didn't die out, that just have moved.
Right.
Because, like I said, every country around the world has some sort of Bigfoot-like creature.
Right.
So the ones in Africa could be a Paranthropus. The ones in Asia could be a Gigantopithecus. The ones here could be something else.
Well, and who's to say that there wasn't a common ancestor prior to both of those, where, you know, like land was more connected at some point?
Well, yeah. I mean, imagine the concept of Pangea, which was one giant continent.
Yeah,
so all life forms,
I think it was like the Triassic period or whatever, dinosaur time. Yeah.
Right. So all of these, because there were some small mammals beginning at the end of the dinosaur time. Mm-hmm. So these small mammals could have lived on Pangea, and when the crack happened, they got isolated in different continents. Yeah. So it wouldn't be even a big surprise if there's a similar evolution of these animals on different places because they have similar ancestry.
Right.
So, and in 2013, ZooBank, which is a non-governmental organization that's basically all zoologists except as the Holy Grail.
Okay.
They started to assign when they assign species names.
Okay.
So the JoyfulDeath.
That's me.
Yeah. So when they give species names, they approved the registration request for the name friggin' Homo sapiens cognatus, which is what a lot of your scientists refer to as Bigfoot and Sasquatch.
Okay.
But Bigfoot and Sasquatch have been part of the American identity since before the white people showed up in America. The Native Americans had a belief of a kind of a historical working relationship with Bigfoot. Mm-hmm. They saw them as elder beings that were beneficial to humanity.
And that was who again?
The Native Americans.
Native Americans. Okay.
I don't necessarily know off the top of my head.
So they have lore about Bigfoot as well?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Some of the cave paintings and petroglyphs will show these large, hairy humans that interacted with the natives.
Okay.
In fact, I think it was now don't be mad if I get it wrong.
I'm gonna be mad. I'm gonna be so mad.
One of the Native Americans on the eastern seaboard, so be it the Cree or the Choctaw or one of them, they actually would tell stories about how the Bigfoot would fight against another thing, which we will talk about shortly. It was the Dogman.
Okay.
Where the Bigfoot was more beneficial in kind and cared about humanity, the Dogman was more evil entity and would fight and attack humans.
Okay, so they saw Bigfoot as they kind of maybe didn't work with Bigfoot necessarily, but were kind of just peaceful, and Bigfoot was...
They would trade and things like...
And things like what?
They would trade and they would communicate with, and they would, especially if winters got hard, Bigfoot might bring them deer or things like that.
Oh, okay.
Now, that's in pre-Columbian times. Then you have, before the account that I'm going to get to, in the 1800s, one of our most infamous, hunting presidents, Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah.
Teddy Roosevelt was all about wanting to find a Bigfoot. He went on many expeditions out west looking for Bigfoot.
Huh. Is that why he established national parks, is so he could find Bigfoot?
I mean, but most of your Bigfoot reports actually like I said, the Bigfoot term came in the 1950s.
Mm-hmm.
But what most people either knew of the native Sasquatch, or they would refer to them as wild men.
Okay.
An interesting thing is about the wild man. The very first Bigfoot sighting, the wild man sighting, in Illinois happened in the town that I live in.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Huh.
According to the book Mysterious Illinois by the author Troy Taylor,
Okay.
the first reported sighting of an unclassified bipedal hominid in Illinois happened in September of 1883.
September of 1883. That was a long time ago.
Yeah. There is a woman, the wife of Dr. John Saltenberger, was attacked by a, quote, naked roaming madman
Okay.
who had been roaming around the country for several days and had been causing, quote, intense excitement and consternation to the world.
I love how they just, their words back then were so good. It causes some deep consternation. I was so upset.
Yep. According to the reports, Miss Saltenberger was riding, like, in her carriage back from their orchard on their property when this creature surprised her, and it crept out of the woods near the vineyard and jumped on her carriage.
Oh.
And it started, like, shaking and roaring at her.
Jeez.
And, quote, scaring the wits out of poor Mrs. Dr. Saltenberger.
Saltenberger. I love that name. Okay, sorry. Keep going.
It then jumped off after she, quote, hit it about the head and neck with the butt of her whip.
Oh, nice.
It jumped off the buggy and ran off into the woods.
Huh.
A few days later, somebody else saw it about a few miles away, like walking through their fields.
Maybe it was like high on catnip or something for it to like attack her. It seems random.
Well, it was in her vineyard, so it might have gotten that. So.
Got a little drunk on the,
yep.
on the fruits there.
So, but yeah, let me. There's a quote about it that I really love, but I gotta find it.
Okay.
There it is. Mrs. Saltenberger was horrified to notice that it was entirely naked. But being a courageous woman, she beat it over the head so effectively with the butt of her whip that he relinquished his hold. I love that quote.
Maybe he was wanting a lady friend.
That could be it. Because you like the old-timey speech, I will give you the last bit of this article.
Okay.
Efforts have been made to capture him, but so far unsuccessfully. Such are the reports as picked up on the streets. But how much truth there is in them, your correspondent testifieth not.
Testifieth not. I cannot testifieth against this. It's so silly. Love it.
Now, so the wild man was a common occurrence. People would see, and in fact, most people just assumed they were some form of Indian. The term savage would apply to both Bigfoot or to Indians.
Okay.
So a lot of your savages that would attack carriages out west were described as naked, hairy wild man.
Okay. And they thought it was just Indians?
Yeah.
Or Native Americans, I should say.
Yeah. So
Weird.
the Bigfoot occurrence with white people has happened to seem to, up until a point, seem to be more, antagonistic than it was with the natives.
Right.
So,
well, because, Native Americans seem to be very much more in tune with nature and
white folks love to shoot at things.
It's weird. It scares me. I'm going to shoot it.
Mm-hmm. I don't know what it is, but it needs to not be alive no more.
Yep, it scares me.
Yep. So, but the best known Bigfoot, I think that anyone possibly knows, everyone has seen it. If you've been alive, you've seen it. Was the 1967 Patterson-Gimlin film.
Okay.
Everyone knows that this is the video of Bigfoot.
Where he's like, he looks kind of shadowy in the woods. He's kind of walking a little bit.
Starts walking away and kind of turns back and looks at him and keeps walking.
Yep, I remember that.
Well,
I mean, I didn't see the whole film, but I remember seeing just like that little clip. Yeah. So
it happened on October 20th in 1967. Apparently, Patterson and Gimlin were out, wandering around the Bluff Creek National Park. And on Friday afternoon, they were heading kind of northeast along the stream when they came around a fallen tree with a huge root system, and they saw it. When they saw the beast, they had a little reel-to-reel 8mm camera, and all of a sudden their horses started bucking and going crazy and freaking out.
Mm-hmm.
And so Patterson reached for his saddlebag, tried to grab his camera, but the horse kind of bucked him and he fell off.
Okay.
So the first few moments of the film that everyone knows shows kind of like him wildly looking around to figure out where the thing was, until he finally picks up on it, walking away from them.
Huh.
Now, the whole film lasted about 20 seconds.
Okay.
Now there's been 1,000 different debates about it, and trying to figure out who was it real, was it a hoax, was it whatever. Patterson died saying that this was real.
Okay.
Gimlin, however, at one point said this was a complete, that him and Patterson went out there to film a Bigfoot. That Patterson had bought the Bigfoot costume from a Hollywood studio, and that people had seen the Bigfoot costume on an episode of Star Trek or an episode of Lost in Space. But then later he recanted his story, saying that no, well, see, we were gonna fake it, but then we actually saw a real one.
Okay.
The big thing is, and this is where I don't like bringing this one up because it's full of consternation.
Consternation!
Yep, but the Bigfoot that was filmed by Patterson and Gimlin wasn't a he.
Oh.
It was a female.
Okay.
You can tell that because if you zoom in on the
Hold on, you cut out a little bit. If you zoom in, what?
If you zoom in on the video, which has been done by 1,000 times, you can have close-up stills of the image now, which I've sent to you.
Okay.
The Bigfoot in question has breasts.
All right.
Gimlin could never claim if it did or not. So the suit that Patterson bought,
okay.
He said Patterson bought this suit.
How many monster or Bigfoot suits have boobs on them? Seriously,
right?
They don't sound like boobs, right?
Well, I'm sure they do now. But...
That's more of a fetish thing.
But
we're not here for that.
Right? Yeah. Well, don't kink shame.
I'm not. I'm just saying we're not here for that. That's fine.
Right.
You do.
But so the thing is, though, primatologists and television experts and anatomists and all these different people have broke down that film frame by frame. And some people say that no human being could walk that well in that large of a suit because they've estimated it to be almost 7 foot tall. That there is fluid movement in everything it does. Right. Television experts and film experts have broken it down to where they have frame by frame looked at every angle of the creature in the film to see if they can find a zipper or see if they can find anything that doesn't add up.
Right.
And in recent years, so we're talking in the last 10 years, the film editing has gotten so good where they've actually been able to look at it and you can see muscle movement underneath the fur of this thing as it does walk.
Really?
Yeah,
That's fascinating.
Its calves will bulge as it takes larger steps. You can see the movement of its back as the shoulder blades move. So, was it real? Maybe. Was it a big elaborate hoax, like people will continually claim? I don't know. I wasn't there. But it is the best known film of Bigfoot in the world.
If psychologically, if we could talk about how, Gimlin was it was a hoax because maybe he was getting so much pressure and he just wanted people to leave him alone, and he thought maybe if he admitted that it was a hoax, people would just be leave him.
Yeah, they would drop it.
They would drop it and leave him alone. Maybe. I'm just thinking of spitballing here as a possibility of why he would claim it was a hoax at some point.
No, it's absolutely possible.
Yeah, because I'm sure they got a lot of heat and attention for that. Yeah.
And now, like, the Bluff Creek area where they were is kind of now a pilgrimage point for a lot of Bigfoot enthusiasts. They will walk up the creek that the Patterson and Gimlin went up.
And if that happens a lot, do you think, like, would Bigfoot even still be there? Like, you know, if it's such a recluse creature, it probably has moved on to a more quieter place.
Well, yeah, if people keep encroaching into it. But,
right.
like, this isn't like people are leading expeditions daily.
Right. So that's true.
If this is an indigenous creature, then it could still be there.
It's true.
So, some of the other better-known Bigfoots, aside from those, are the Beast of Boggy Creek in Arkansas.
Okay.
Also known as the Fouke Monster, Fouke.
Okay.
The Beast of Boggy Creek, the Fouke Monster or Fouke Monster, was a Bigfoot sighted actually by many, many people in the town of Fouke, Arkansas, in 1997.
Okay. In 1997?
Yeah.
Okay. Recently.
Yeah, people were reporting this Bigfoot to be super aggressive. Oh. It killed a couple people's dogs. It was trying to get into a few homes. It was extraordinarily aggressive for the course of a few months, and then just kind of wandered off.
That seems different than the Bigfoot's usual MO.
Usually, but there are many reported cases of Bigfoot being threatening. They don't seem to be openly hostile. Most of the time, they will be threatening them.
Okay.
So let's say you and Pikey and Mopar went for a walk through the woods.
Uh-huh.
And say you have, some of the dogs with you.
Right.
You're walking through the woods, everything's fine, you're walking the creek, you're looking out for bears because you're smart.
Right.
And
bears.
Right. And so all of a sudden you hear this low, bassy growl.
Okay.
And
I'm thinking mountain lion.
You think mountain lion. You think bear. Exactly. Well, that's exactly the point. You think this is a regular, understandable animal that I'm gonna have to look out for.
Right.
So you're walking up the creek a little further, and then all of a sudden you hear what sounds like almost a gunshot loud, something smacking against a tree.
Huh.
Well,
okay.
A lot of these sightings of people who have Bigfoot sightings hear these growls. We'll hear these tree knocks. They will hear whoops, like you hear a monkey go whoop.
Oh, okay.
They will hear these like threat behaviors.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes if some people will claim that Bigfoot will do what's called a predatory bluff charge.
Oh, okay.
They will rush at you and then back off.
Okay.
Well, to basically just trying to get you to run away.
Right.
A lot of people believe that they get aggressive like this if you are close to their young.
Well, that makes sense.
That they will threaten you and try to get you to run away. They don't want to necessarily hurt you, but they will try to spook you.
Right. So when they're doing those tree knocks, do you think they're like smacking it kind of thing?
Yeah, they just take a fallen log and whack the crap out of a tree.
That really reminds me of the beaver that we saw when we were on the river. It chased me. It was carrying its kid in its mouth. Pikey and I were on our kayaks on the river, and he saw something weird in the river not too far from him, and he saw the beaver, and then he saw it was carrying something in its mouth, and then he saw the beaver drop the thing out of its mouth, and the thing swam to shore, and we guessed it was its kit then. It was carrying its kit in its mouth. And then it started like mooing at us, like type of thing. And then it slapped the water. It slapped its tail on the water, and it chased me for a certain distance. So, if you look at that kind of behavior and compare it to like Bigfoot, for example, that seems very reasonable,
Well, and the big thing that we find with known gorillas, your lowland gorillas and your silverback gorillas, they will actually do both of those things too.
Okay.
They will growl, they will whoop, they will smack trees, they will try to make themselves look as big and threatening as they possibly can, and they will even bluff charge. It's a basic primate behavior.
Right. Well, and we are even told to do that with other animals, like bears
Right.
and whatnot. Like, make
Yeah,
yourself
look
bigger, make lots of noise. 'Cause
Right.
You're warning them, like, don't mess with me. I'm big and scary. Go away, type of thing. That's
Right.
really fascinating. I hadn't heard that about. That's really interesting. I really like that. I mean, I guess I don't know if I should say I like that.
Some of the other ones people know pretty well is, like, again, I mentioned Momo, the monster.
Right.
The one here in Missouri. It was throughout the 70s and early 80s. It was just, there was a rash of Bigfoot sightings all over the greater St. Louis metro area.
Mm-hmm.
And people, again, a little bit like the Fok monster, they were saying that it was attacking pets, that it was attacking livestock.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that set Momo apart from everything else was Momo had 3 toes.
Right.
So they would find these large 3-toed prints, and some people thought it was like some sort of weird reptile or some unknown bird. But
Mhm.
then people started seeing this Bigfoot, and
Mhm.
they put 2 and 2 together.
Is it possible that Bigfoot had an injury? On both
That's entirely well. That's entirely possible, or it was
or it was what?
born deformed.
Right.
Which could also be why it was a little bit more. That it was kicked out of its clan or tribe or whatever word you want to use.
Could be a young male, like
Could be a young male. Could be any or an old one.
Okay, right.
So
Yeah.
could be any number of those possibilities
Mhm.
to where it was slightly different.
Right. Interesting.
Another one that a lot of people like to talk about. There are 2. There's the skunk ape in Florida,
Mm-hmm.
which is basically the only weird thing about skunk ape is, one, the smell.
Ew.
People
Gross.
say it has a very gross, sulfury, musty, dead animal smell. So
Ew.
you'll smell it from a long distance off.
I wonder why.
Well, because it lives in the swamps.
Right, and maybe it rubs dead animals on itself.
Right, or that, or it's because of its diet. It's
Right.
eating catfish and muddy, slimy toads and things like that.
Well, like, my dogs, if they get half the chance, they will roll in some really nasty shit. And if you don't have somebody to wash you off...
Absolutely. And the other big thing about the skunk ape is its color. People have reported the skunk ape looking a lot like a orangutan.
Oh, so
It has
bright
like
orange.
a bright orange color.
Okay.
The other one is the West Virginia Yahoo.
Okay.
It's very similar in color and shape to Bigfoot that we know about. The Yahoo, though, is supposedly 8 foot tall, can be brown, dark brown, any shade of brown, or black.
Uh-huh.
But it is known, it was a lot of people who used to work at sawmills and loggers would go into the West Virginia mountains looking for trees, and they would hear this horribly loud, impossibly loud scream of Yahoo!
Yahoo!
Exactly.
maybe
Down through the mountains.
not like an excited Yahoo.
Right. Or it wouldn't necessarily Yahoo, but any kind of loud, screamy mouth sound. And so it just started becoming locally known as the Yahoo.
Okay, gotcha.
So Bigfoot's probably my favorite of the cryptids.
Why is it your favorite?
Why is it my favorite? Because to me, it is the most plausible.
Okay, that's fair.
Because an undiscovered large gorilla-like creature, that's not even that hard to believe.
No, I can see that. I can see that.
Some of the rest of the ones we'll talk about, though, the next one I want to talk about...
Before we get started on any next things, we are already at an hour.
Holy crap.
I know! So, let's do any wrap-up that we want to do, and we'll talk
I will
about
finish,
other stuff.
I will finish that thought.
Yeah,
The next one I want to talk about, if I truly believe that Bigfoot is possible, the next one I want to talk about is the other one that I think is the most possible.
Uh-huh.
And other than that, we'll get to that when we get to that.
And what other one do you think is the next most possible?
The different kinds of lake
monsters. I mean, I am excited about that one too, because I think I've always liked the stuff about Nessie, because I know we're going to talk about Nessie, and that was something I really liked, like when I was younger. and seeing all the photos and looking at different stuff. And you know, I always thought that was really exciting. But we're going to have to talk about that in the next episode because, oh my gosh, you have so much information about all this stuff. So everyone, thank you so much for listening to part 1, which might turn into being 3 parts. We'll see.
Maybe.
We'll see how this goes. But I really hope you enjoyed this episode of Joyful Death Spooky October, whatever the heck I called it at the beginning episode of this podcast. Thank you, Jim, so much for all of your knowledge and sharing that with me, with us. And thank you, Patreons, for your support and your kindness in, supporting me on Patreon. And anybody who's not a Patreon, thank you so much for coming over here to listen to this podcast. I hope you really enjoyed it, and I hope you look forward to hearing more from us. Don't forget to follow, on Twitter at Joyful Death, and Facebook Joyful Death, and Instagram Joyful Death 8, because for whatever reason I couldn't just have Joyful Death. I don't know why. And YouTube, I stream. Jim, what days do I stream?
On YouTube, it is Tuesdays and Fridays.
Oh yeah.
Twitch, it is Mondays, Thursdays, and Friday during the day.
Well, and it's Mondays and Thursdays at night, and then Friday during the day.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. So make sure you follow me, Joyful Death. Just Google me, and I'm sure you'll find me somewhere. And Dammit Jim actually has his own Facebook page, The Stream of Consciousness.
Yep, Stream of Consciousness comic. On Facebook.
On Facebook.
Yeah. It's basically it's just my exaggerated life in comic strip form.
He's really funny, believe it or not. Whether they want to believe it or not, I think you are.
Thank you. I think.
I feel like this is a backhand compliment. You're right, sir, but I still adore you. He is. He's very funny. He's a good artist. He's done a lot of the art for my channel, a lot of sprites for a lot of people in the community. So I would really appreciate it if you went and gave his Facebook comic book page a look. And a whole bunch of links will be in the video description. So please check all those out. So I really hope you enjoyed this, and we will see you on the next episode. I hope you're having a great day. Have a great October. I'm Joyful Death. Talk to you later. I'm just going to let it go out for a little bit. I'll cut this out, but I want to have some cutoff space.